The science have told us, and unlike the current occupants of the White House, I actually believe in science. The science
10,000 people. 10,000 people. These crowds are tremendous. You may not necessarily see it on mainstream media, but Sanders has been bringing it state after state after state after state. And in Denver, again, massive crowds. If you want to get across a certain degree of support, meaning to get across how much support you have, is when people will come out of their house and stand and listen to a very elderly man get on stage and tell you policy after policy after policy to deal with one failing in our particular society after the next. Failings that have gone on for far, far too long without being attended to, because part of the problem were the parties themselves. 10,000 people. What you're seeing here is also translating into polling. I've been at a Sanders rally. It is a love fest. Ever so much as those hate rallies of Trump, I swear to God, it is a love fest. I went to Temple, Pennsylvania, Temple College in Pennsylvania. I get off the train, I walk to where I need to be, and it is a line that stretches around like 5 times. And the venue couldn't even hold everyone. It took 5 or 6 hours for the line to essentially get into the building. And even from that part, you had a large number of people who literally were just left out. I get in there, and there's like fluffers, people who, get the crowd, get involved. But then Sanders comes out. Sanders was out talking to the people who were in the overflow first. So when he got in, it was late. So at this point, it's like 6-hour enterprise just to get into the building and just to listen to him. It was like a rock star. That place lit up. That place went bananas. Here's the catch. It feels like a religious experience almost. And I suppose to some degree, politics, religion, all of those things are just issues of ideology. I don't know anyone else in that building. By the same token, all of us have a certain ideological framework because all of us are listening to this guy. There's a basic understanding of what society should look like, even if we don't necessarily know what it is in a full fleshed out way. And at the very least, we know how it is now is not the way it should be, and that we can move to a better spot. That guy is saying stuff that resonates with everybody in that building. And in such, it feels like somewhat of a love fest. My point is, the support is because they agree with what's coming out of his mouth. And it's not just them, by the way. If you're asking American public, just on policy, what do you think the public should look like? Most of the policies that Sanders is espousing are popular. Look at the polling. Beyond looking at the polling for popularity, which Sanders tops, I want to get into the polling where he also tops for the early states that are coming up, including a poll that just came out almost like a few hours ago, a national poll. I said Biden is flaming out, and I stand by it. Let's talk about some polling. Sanders leads or is in striking distance. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, you find yourself coming back here often, please like, share, subscribe. We are growing. I am almost at 25,000. That number still amazes me. If you really dig it, please consider supporting through PayPal or Patreon. These videos are demonetized constantly. At some point, they may be turned on, but ultimately, this content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you for allowing me to do so. I follow polling. More so, I like to see trends within polling. It's like getting on a scale. One scale has a particular weight, another scale has a particular weight. There's a certain bias within the context of the scales, but from the standpoint of where it trends on that scale, it gives me a general idea on where the public is, where its head is, where it looks like it's going, the direction. Since the last debate, Sanders has done remarkably well, and he's shown further advancement, probably more than anybody else. Now, I say that because there's been metrics for that, but Warren has also done pretty well since the last debate. So give credit where credit is due. In this particular case, though, the horse I'm riding on this is Sanders, and I want to talk about the recent polling that has come out for New Hampshire. Now, a poll came out for New Hampshire that was somewhat of an outlier. I think it was last week. But the polling, multiple polls, are showing something different, and they're showing Sanders either in the lead or at the top of the heap. So this is Franklin Pierce University, Boston Herald. Vice President has lost his lead in New Hampshire with U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders jumping ahead in what is now clearly a three-person race for the Democratic primary, a new Franklin Pierce University Boston Herald poll shows. Sanders tops at 29% of likely Democratic voters. Biden comes in second with 21%. And Massachusetts, Warren is in third place with 17%. That's a big jump. That's a big jump. Like, that's, it's a three-person race, yeah, but man, Sanders, 8-point lead. New Hampshire, that's one of the early voting states. Here's another one. This is Harris Expo, 9/11/2019. Joe Biden, 22%. Sanders, 21%. Essentially a statistical tie between Sanders and Biden. Again, Harris Expo is, if I'm not mistaken, a Democratic-approved poll. I could be wrong, but I think they are. But Sanders, Biden, 21, 22, pretty much a tie. Warren, third, distant at 15%. What both of these polls have in common is Elizabeth Warren is in distant third. All right. Now, here's another one. This one just came out. Now, this is a very detailed poll. It's called the McLaughlin. Let's see. I want to get the right name for it. This one is the McLaughlin and something poll. Here we are. McLaughlin and Associates. Okay, fair enough. Biden, 28%. Sanders, 21%. Now, this is a national poll. This is not a New Hampshire poll. The other two polls that I showed you were from New Hampshire. This one is national. Biden, 28%. Sanders, 21%. Warren, 12%. Ouch. That's painful. That's painful, dog. I mean, but after all, she's an echo. I got to be honest, I don't know why anybody would vote for an untrustworthy echo. Just saying. Also, she's working with Hillary Clinton, which should essentially tell you right off the bat. And she wants to keep it secret. Like the girlfriend that you don't want people to know that you're messing around with. All right, so the McLaughlin poll, Biden, 28%. Sanders, 21%. At one point in many of these national polls, Biden was in the lead by like 20 points, 30 points, or like 20 points, 15 points. And in this case, Biden's lead has shrunk. And it's not just this poll, it's multiple polls are showing Biden's lead is shrinking. I have said Biden is going to flame out. I stand by that entirely. Stand by it entirely. It's like watching a corpse. You know it's going to drop. You just can't necessarily tell the exact moment. At some point, the gaffes, the mental fits, the not being up to the task of remembering dates and details, and to being a shadow of a form of self, getting bullied. That stuff is going to add up at a certain point. How many debates can you go into where you are just getting outright pushed around? At some point, the American public starts to notice. I think they're starting to notice. Not to mention, Sanders has been pouring it on. Like, he's been everywhere. He's been ubiquitous. Joe Biden, 28. Sanders, 21. Kamala Harris, 6. Ooh, that hurts. That burns. Elizabeth Warren, 12. There's something else you should notice. 11-18, Biden was at 19%. 12-18, 17. Then when it gets real, he's in the race. 3-19, people think he's going to get in the race. 5-19, he's in the race. 6-19, dominance at 34% of 34% domination. 7-19, 28%. All right, a little bit less dominant, but still dominant. 9-19, 28%. But the catch here is, not only has he gone from 34 to 28, Sanders has gone from 15 to 21. Meaning that lead at one point that was double is now down to just 7. Hope you understand my point. He's fading. And this poll gets extremely detailed, by the way. Like, it breaks it down by all of these various groupings. This matters less to me in the context of us discussing it. Tulsi Gabbard is at 2 in this poll. And by the way, Tulsi Gabbard is qualified for the very next debate. This one, not so much. If that poll would have came out a little bit earlier, it would have allowed her to qualify for the debates coming up tonight. Dodgy, to say the least. Dodgy, or at the very least poorly planned, poorly executed, or maybe executed just right. It goes into Donald Trump's approval and the other candidates. Joe Walsh has no chance. I'm sorry, he doesn't. And like I said, these are less important to me. Look, my basic point is Biden is fading. Good. The only point of this video. This video is not even going to be long. It's just literally to point out the most recent polling that we have at our disposal. Don't trust polls. Get registered and vote primary. Bernie will get elected. Yes. Bernie's ground game is a beast. Pop reality. Yes. A Pac-Man video yesterday about Warren lead in New Hampshire. Well, again, some of the polling, I'm going by the most recent that just came out. So Pac-Man can push whatever he wants. And I don't necessarily doubt that there may be a poll that's showing Warren maybe in the lead. In fact, there was, like I said, there was an outlier poll that came out. If I'm not mistaken, for New Hampshire. But these are recent. These came out like over the last couple of days. Not to mention that last poll, the McLaughlin one, literally just came out today. So this is the most recent information that we have in regards to trending, in regards to polling from the standpoint of the state of New Hampshire. I showed the polling the other day that showed Bernie Sanders in 3 of the 4 states was within, at the very least, striking distance, and that was by NBC's own polling. South Carolina, Joe Biden is a beast. Just African Americans, Negroes are out there voting for Biden. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ. It's like, dude, come back from the light. Come back from the light. He's not going to be in your best interest. Nevertheless, this is where we are. But Sanders is doing well. I guess that's my point. Sanders is doing well. And I know not everybody agrees with Sanders on this case, or at the very least they think he's not far enough to the left for him or something to that effect, or they've given up on politics. I've done no such thing. Also, the polls don't matter if people don't vote. I mean, ultimately, the polling is under the assumption that people register to vote, go to the polls, and vote for the person who they want. In this case, the person, if you want Sanders, you need to go and register to vote for Sanders. That's especially in New York, because in New York, they have that weird cutoff. And so New York's, I think it's like in October or November or something, where they cut off for the very next year. So yeah, register to vote and do so. So yeah. All right. Paul wants free stuff, even if it's a dream. It's never free, Bob. It's not free. It's never free, right? I mean, do we have a democratic system or a capitalistic system? We have both. They intersect. The goal of our government, at least in my eyes, and that's really all that matters at this point, is a cohesive society. I want a society that can grow, that can develop, and all those things without necessarily destroying the habitable space of the world around us and without people being miserable. Because at the end of the day, to me, people matter more. And when people are miserable, you get increases in crime, you get increases in violence, you even get increases of racial hatred or the blaming of the other. I want to stop that stuff. Now, if we're going to be in a capitalistic system and Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or whoever, whichever of these plutocrats say, I want to get $1 billion. I don't want you to get $1 billion, but okay. But that's only under the guidelines that I just espouse, because we are a democratic system, meaning you can get rich providing that there is no homeless. You can get rich providing that people are taken care of from the standpoint of the business space. It's not free stuff. Ultimately, in order for them to become who they are, we either buy their products or work at their factories and stores and all this other stuff. So yeah, it's not free. And yeah, there is somewhat of a social contract where if you're going to get rich, at the very least, society is going to also be able to grow and expand in accordance with. My point is this. The people who make up the society essentially is us. I mean, we take out the trash, we do the streets, we make sure the air stays clean, we write the programs, we build the bridges, we run the companies, we run the factories, we run the floors in these factories. We know the businesses of these various countries more intimately than the people who essentially put the money down on it. The crucial ingredient in society are workers, the 99%. However, the wealth of those people are essentially expropriated up to allow people to be Bezos, or allow people to be Gates, or the Koch brothers, or the Walmarts. It's not free. Ultimately, they are only where they are by the acquiescence of everybody else to allow them to be such. In the same way that we got rid of kings and queens, I would argue at some point we need to get rid of CEOs. While they are still here, at the very least, if we are going to be the instrumental ingredient in them being rich, then I don't think it's insane at all to say that society should be accommodated for allowing the opportunity to be such. They get their cops, they get their firefighters, they get clean air, they get roads, streets, all that stuff. Yeah, they can pay their fair share. It's not free. It's just society deems it so. And I would argue that it's somewhat of a necessary ingredient in order for society to be cohesive. Congratulations. You're rich. Pay your fair share. All right. I'll leave it here. This notion of free stuff, Republicans like to use that line, and it's not really, the line doesn't really make sense. They are only what they are by definition or by distinction of us. And I would argue at some point people need to wake up and realize that. I mean, for the most part, you've allowed so much wealth to be expropriated to the top while simultaneously allowing them to use the services and everything else, but not necessarily want to pay for those services. And bitching and complaining and putting money behind politicians that are trying to gut the government, gut services, lower taxes, and all this other stuff. At some point, the public needs to realize that they are a crucial ingredient in those people becoming who they are. It's not free stuff in that sense. It's always paid for. But in the expropriation of wealth, and in order to keep a democratic order and to keep that system cohesive, yeah, they need to pay their fair share. Nobody's begrudged or is attacking you for being rich. At least not typically. But there is something to be said about the social contract, that you are what you are only by distinction of us. And as such, it is utterly insane that the 95% of the population allows that much wealth to be expropriated to the top without having some level of balance in regards to services as such. Meaning, if you were making $15 an hour and your health care was taken care of, your education was taken care of, you're not as poor as if you were making $15 an hour and you had to pay every expense. If public transportation was available to you as opposed to needing a car, like those are things that make your life materially better. It makes your world materially better. why wouldn't the society itself somewhat demand, at the very least, in exchange for being able to maximize your profit, that society needs to get its ends in order to accommodate society? I don't think that's insane at all. That's just being part of a democratic system. They intersect. Fine, continue to be the losers with nowhere else to go. Right there. Then say that. Then say that. Then don't use the Republican argument of giving stuff away. That's where you wanted to go. Fine. Your issue, I think your main issue, is that you believe that for the most part, running in the Democratic Party puts you under the thumb of the Democratic Party. And believe it or not, to some degree, I agree with you. Fair enough. By the same token, you would also have to admit that MSNBC, CNN, these groups that have been pushing Warren, Washington Post, all these groups, pushing Warren hard, TYT, and they consider Sanders to be a threat to the Democratic order. They're having anti-Sanders meetings. You don't have anti-Sanders meetings if you don't need to have anti-Sanders meetings. They're spending billions of dollars to try to stop him from getting in office. If you are right, they wouldn't do that. And if you're going to say that they're doing that just as a feint, again, they wouldn't do that. They are terrified of what Sanders is going to do if he gets in that office. And again, public control of utilities. God, I love that. I love that. I think that's an awesome idea. Expanding environmental policy in order to deal with needs of real people, meaning solar power within the context of individual houses. Now, this was an idea I came up with years ago because my thought was it makes all the sense in the world to try to give people a certain degree of freedom. And freedom is not necessarily the thing, you out in the outback by yourself. In the context of a society, freedom is a society that allows you to essentially be who you are without certain limitations that are accommodated with just being an individual person. Meaning, again, healthcare. How can I be free if I'm dying on the street with cancer? Or education. How can I be free when I don't even have the mental state that would allow a reasonable, contextual critique of the society to which I live? I'm saying there's certain things that are necessary for being free because they're not necessarily an aspect of the human being in and of themselves. Yes, a baby laying in the wilderness is absolutely free. He's free to be eaten by coyotes. There's a difference in those things. It's not that I entirely disagree with you, Bob. It's just I look at this from a political space and know that there have been times where there have been changes in our political demeanor, hegemonic shifts. Bill Clinton was a shift. Ronald Reagan, to some degree, was a shift. FDR was a shift. Teddy Roosevelt, to some degree, was a shift. There are things with these times, these things change. And my argument is, if Sanders wins, we are in the middle of a change. And that's something that I would say recognize. I mean, think about where your world is today. You have two of the leading, or what's considered to be, lefty Congress members running in the race. And in many of the states are either in the lead or in a three-person race for the lead. Now, I consider Warren to be an echo. And I even consider Warren to some degree to be the party's way of trying to gut Sanders. I think it's absolutely possible Warren is under the thumb of the party. It makes sense in the world to me that they will push her to run, knowing that she is a controllable factor where he is less so. With this notion that either it's going to hit him in the knees and split the vote, or Biden wins. You don't do that stuff if you don't think it's a change. And understand what it means. Like, the Democratic priorities are not the priorities that Sanders has been pushing. I mean, the stuff that he's been talking about has been utterly transformative. And it's across every sector. They don't support him, Bob. If they did support him, there wouldn't be this issue. When they were doing the superdelegate count yesterday, how are you counting superdelegates where it's not even supposed to be to the second round? I said this almost years ago, that this is exactly what they were going to do. They were going to say, if the superdelegate count were held, what would be your vote? Warren and Biden in the lead. Why? Because they don't trust Sanders. They don't even consider him a Democrat. It's a shift, Bob. It's a hegemonic shift. If Sanders gets in office, what it means to be a Democrat fundamentally changes. Because ultimately, if this guy is the president and he's a Democrat, and this guy's pushing for all these transformative policies, what the hell are you? It's almost like the Lib Dems. It's like, why are you here? Why are you here? That's kind of what this becomes. It becomes somewhat of a change. They're going to be the backbenchers biting at him. Don't misunderstand me. The Clintonites are going to be angry and bitter and probably are not going to support his priorities. That is also true. But for the most part, what he's going to be pushing for is going to force members of Congress to choose their side, yay or nay. Just like it's taking place right now in the debates. Yay or nay. Do you agree with Sanders? Yes or no? That's been the entire theme of this debating, of this presidential primary. We'll see, Bob, who's right. But I think we're in the middle of a hegemonic shift. I really think we are. Now, if you say they cheat him, fair enough. You might be right. You might be right. However, if he wins and he takes down 20 other Democrats, just like Trump took down 20 other Republicans, he will beat Trump. He will beat Trump. And we're talking about a different world. We're talking about a different world. And by the way, Sanders is not a Democrat, which is, again, part of the reason why they hate him so much and distrust him. I don't know how you can't see the change. I don't get it. If you want change, you have to give the Democrats no choice but to change. That's true, Bob. I agree with that. I agree with that. My argument has been to burn it to the ground. That has been my argument from jump. And in part to that argument, though, I can recognize when there's been a substantial shift. Meaning, clearly they don't like him. Clearly they despise him. The Clintonites hate his guts. That in and of itself should tell you something, whereas they love Warren to bits. He's a change. I'm sorry, he's a change. He's a fundamental shift. My dislike of the party, that's despite me disliking the party, I do trust Sanders. So, mind you, I don't trust him when he says go vote for Democrat. Fair enough. That's, this is where I get off. But from the standpoint of what he wants to do in this instance of policy, yeah, I believe he really wants to accomplish what he say he wants to accomplish. Now, you could say they may cheat him. You could say all that stuff. Fair enough. And if Biden gets it, would I be voting Democrat? Hell no. I am Bernie or bust in this campaign with a potential for Warren. But again, my rule is Medicare for all. That's a red line. And she's getting somewhat flaky on the Medicare for all front. So there that goes. I'm the Bernie or bust camp. To a certain point. All right. In this, like, share, subscribe. Sanders is on the rise. Yeah, Bernie is my write-in. Bernie was my write-in last time also. Well, I voted Jill Stein. In the local primaries, I voted Biden. I think my wife said she wrote in Sanders. Look, this is a big deal. Like, this election is going to be big. And I would say be careful who you choose. My horse is Sanders. I think he's more electable than Biden. I think he's a hell of a lot more electable than Biden. And he wants it. And he has crowds that are massive, meaning he has a major show of support, even from the standpoint of individual donations. He wants it. And given the opportunity, he is going to try to knock out all sorts of things through the party in regards to policy. I think the party will be against him. I think he will be running against the party to some degree. Bring it on. I mean, ultimately, if there's going to be any change in American politics, there has to be a fight, and that fight has to take place within the context of the left. Whatever the Republican Party is, it's going to be somewhat gross. But the lack of trust is fundamentally on the left. Meaning, whether it's from the public itself looking at the Democratic Party and having no idea what it stands for. I tell you this. Going from a party that has no idea what it stands for to a party that does, meaning under Sanders, is a sea change. That's a sea change, Bob. All right, I'll leave it here. And by the way, I hate the label stuff. Like, people, I have a video with Tulsi Gabbard, Dylan Rubin, and people were hitting her for a label. It's like, oh, this woman is not progressive. She's not progressive. I don't know what that means. And in fact, oftentimes I don't know what people mean when they say progressive. I have a general idea what it means, and I think people have a general idea in their heads. But oftentimes that can be askew and can be arguable, and using a fudgeable standard to compare somebody to is a little different. That said, I got to be honest, I didn't like the Rubin interview. And it wasn't because of progressive bona fides or anything else. If anything, I don't necessarily like acquiescence right-wing framing, especially when I don't necessarily think that framing is all that true. And when Rubin has a dog in it, he's trying to he's trying to put forward point of views to his right-wing audience, trying to claim that he's a liberal, whatever the hell he calls himself. I'm going to do that interview. People are going to hate this video again, even though I'm being absolutely honest with you. And like I said, when I like things, I like them. When I dislike them, I dislike them. That's with Trump. That's with Warren. That's with anybody. I tell you how I feel about it. That's what the show is. I like Sanders, but if Sanders tomorrow came and said, let's cut Social Security, I'd drop him like a hot potato. It's not love of Sanders. It's more so the policies that he espouses. He's just the avatar for that. I think that's true of pretty much any candidate that I may like or dislike. I don't like that interview with Rubin. But that's another video. Sanders is on fire. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all. I will be back about 10, 15 minutes.